Okay, so what's really been grabbing headlines lately, it's that awful attack in Indian-administered Kashmir.
Hmm.
And the follow-up that's got everyone talking, well, it's India's response. Specifically mentioning that huge water treaty with Pakistan, the Indus Waters Treaty from 1960.
Yeah, it's quite something, isn't it? That immediate jump from a security incident to this decades-old water agreement.
Exactly.
It really does shine a light on how these big geopolitical issues are tangled up, often in ways you just don't see coming.
Totally. So that's what we're doing in this deep dive. We're going to try and unpack this whole complex situation.
Right.
Our mission for you today is really to get past those headlines. We want you to understand the core issues, what might actually happen if India moves to suspend this treaty, and, well, some surprising bits along the way.
And we're drawing on info from a recent BBC News report to guide us through it.
Yeah. And just for context, Indian-administered Kashmir refers to the part of the Kashmir region controlled by India.
And it's so vital to keep the real-world impact in mind here. The Indus River Basin, I mean, it's not just lines on a map, is it?
Not at all.
It's this critical water source flowing through both India and Pakistan. It supports millions of people, their lives, their jobs.
Absolutely crucial. And here's where it gets, well, really interesting. This treaty, the Indus Waters Treaty, this agreement on sharing this essential water,
Mhm.
it actually survived two full-scale wars between India and Pakistan.
Just think about that.
I mean, yeah, it's pretty remarkable when you consider it. A real example of transboundary water management.
It says a lot about how vital both sides considered it, doesn't it? And a
Well,
testament to its importance.
definitely. This resilience, it wasn't just about, the technical side of water sharing. It kind of reflected this mutual understanding, maybe fragile, but still there,
Hmm.
that cooperating on water was just crucial for stability, even when everything else was falling apart.
Exactly. Even when communication broke down elsewhere.
Yeah. And the current situation maybe suggests we're seeing a shift away from that basic understanding.
It really emphasizes the weight both nations put on keeping this agreement going, even in really tough times. That it lasted so long speaks volumes.
Okay, so let's get into the trigger here and what India's been doing. Like we said, this talk of suspending the treaty came right after that terrible attack in Kashmir.
Mm-hmm.
India blames Pakistan, accusing them of backing cross-border terrorism, which, the BBC notes, Islamabad flatly denies.
And we need to remember this isn't happening in a vacuum, right?
Right.
India's taken other steps in retaliation, and Pakistan has responded too. And then you have that really strong statement from Pakistan saying stopping water flow would be seen as an act of war.
Wow. Yeah, that definitely escalates things. It really underlines how incredibly sensitive this water issue is.
Absolutely.
So let's dig into the Indus Waters Treaty itself. What's the basic deal here that's suddenly under so much strain?
Okay, so at its heart, the treaty divides up the water in the Indus Basin. It gave the three eastern rivers, that's the Ravi, Beas, and Sutlej, mostly to India for their use. But crucially, it gave Pakistan about 80% of the water from the three western rivers, the Indus, the Jhelum, and the Chenab.
And that share of the Western rivers, that's absolutely critical for Pakistan, yeah. The reporting really stresses their dependence.
Oh, hugely dependent. Over 80% of Pakistan's entire agricultural sector relies on that water.
80%.
Yeah, and about a third of their hydropower comes from it, too. It's no exaggeration to call it a lifeline for their economy, for their food security.
So you can see why they'd react so strongly.
Exactly. That deep reliance is key to understanding their position now.
Now, this hasn't always been smooth sailing, has it? There have been disagreements before over the last, 60-plus years?
No, definitely not always smooth. There's a history of disputes. Pakistan has often raised objections, concerns about India building hydropower projects or other infrastructure on those western rivers.
What were their main fears?
Their long-standing worry has basically been that these projects could cut down the amount of water flowing downstream into Pakistan, maybe violate the treaty terms, and really hurt their farming.
Got it. And from India's side, the reporting suggests they've wanted to revisit or maybe even change the treaty for a while now. What's their reasoning?
Well, India points to its own changing needs. Their population's grown massively, climate change is having real impacts.
Right.
So their needs for irrigation, drinking water, hydropower, they're different now than in 1960. They argue the treaty, as it stands, doesn't really cover these modern needs.
It's interesting, though, the treaty actually has ways to handle disagreements built into it, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. Both countries have used those legal channels before,
Hmm.
going through the World Bank, which helped broker the deal in the first place.
So they have used the system.
They have. which really underlines that the treaty was meant to last. But what makes this situation so different, so significant, is it's the first time either side has publicly floated the idea of actually suspending it.
Ah, okay. That is a big step.
And, as the report points out, India being upstream gives them a kind of natural geographic leverage in this whole situation.
Right. Which brings us to the big question everyone's asking. Can India actually just turn off the taps? Can they stop the water flowing into Pakistan? Is that even feasible?
Well, according to the experts cited in the report, like Himanshu Thakur from the South Asian Network on Dams, Rivers, and People, it's nearly impossible.
Nearly impossible. Why?
The sheer volume of water, especially during the monsoon season when flows are highest, you're talking billions and billions of cubic meters.
Wow.
Trying to hold all that back. India just doesn't have the massive dams, the huge storage reservoirs, or the extensive canals needed to divert that much water effectively.
Okay.
Think of trying to dam a flood with just a few buckets.
Okay, that puts it in perspective. The article mentions most of India's current projects are run-of-the-river hydropower plants. Can you explain what that means for storage?
Sure. Run-of-the-river plants basically use the river's natural flow to generate electricity. They don't usually have large reservoirs designed to store huge amounts of water for long periods.
So they let the water pass through.
Pretty much. Water comes in, spins the turbines, generates power, and then flows out downstream relatively quickly. They're not built for holding back massive volumes like you'd need to effectively cut off flow to Pakistan.
But the report also brings up this argument from some Indian experts that India hasn't even been able to use its full 20% share of the Western River's water precisely because they lack this big storage infrastructure.
Yes, and that's a really key point of tension. It's a big reason why India wants to potentially change the treaty.
Ah, I see.
These experts argue that building bigger storage dams would let India properly use the water they're entitled to under the treaty. That's why they push for these projects.
But Pakistan opposes them.
Consistently, yes. As we said, they worry these big dams could be used to control or manipulate water flows, violating the treaty.
Okay, now here's something the report highlights as potentially a major shift. Experts are suggesting that with this talk of suspension, India might feel they can now modify their existing dams or build new ones to hold back or divert more water without having to tell Pakistan about it beforehand.
Yes, that's a really significant potential change. Sharing detailed project plans and data was a core part of the treaty's transparency.
Right, keeping everyone informed.
Exactly. If that obligation goes away, India could, in theory, have much more freedom to act unilaterally on its side of the border. Actions that could definitely impact downstream flows into Pakistan, possibly without any warning or consultation.
But the reporting also throws in a dose of reality here. Building these huge water projects isn't easy for India, is it?
Not at all. They face big challenges, really difficult mountain terrain, for one.
And protests?
Yes, domestic protests, too. Environmental concerns, social impacts. These things can cause major delays or even stop projects. And the report notes that after tensions flared up back in 2016, not much actually happened with the projects India announced then.
So political talk is one thing, building massive dams in the Himalayas is another.
Precisely. The practical hurdles are significant.
Okay, so maybe a complete, immediate halt to the water is unlikely. But the report suggests the more pressing worry, the more realistic one, might be the impact during the dry season.
Exactly. Hassan F. Khan from Tufts University makes this point in the report. During the dry months, when river flows are naturally low, that's when having stored water and controlling when it's released becomes absolutely critical, especially for Pakistan's farming.
Ah, okay, so less water overall makes management more critical.
Precisely. And if the treaty rules and transparency aren't there, that could directly hit Pakistan's access to water when they need it most.
And linked to that is this whole issue of sharing data. The treaty requires India to share hydrological data, right? Stuff about water flow.
Yes, crucial data. Pakistan uses it for things like flood forecasting, managing their irrigation, planning hydropower, even ensuring drinking water supplies. It's vital operational information.
And now India might stop sharing it.
Well, India's former treaty commissioner, Pradeep Kumar Saxena, is quoted saying that if the treaty is suspended, India could potentially stop sharing that flood data.
But then Pakistan's former commissioner, Shiraz Memon, suggests they weren't getting all the data anyway, maybe only like 40%.
Yeah, that's the counterpoint mentioned. So even if data sharing wasn't perfect from Pakistan's view,
Stopping it completely would still be a blow.
absolutely. It removes whatever transparency was there. It makes it much harder for Pakistan to predict floods, manage their water effectively, make informed plans, especially during critical times. It increases uncertainty.
Okay. The report also touches on this more dramatic idea, the water bomb. The possibility of India holding back water and then suddenly releasing it to cause floods in Pakistan. How seriously do experts take that?
But generally, experts seem to think a deliberate water bomb is pretty unlikely.
Why is that?
Well, a key reason mentioned is geography. India's main dams on these rivers are quite far upstream from the border.
Okay.
So releasing a massive flood would carry a really big risk of causing serious flooding inside India's own territory first. It seems strategically risky, potentially self-damaging.
Right. Doesn't sound like a smart move. But there's another, maybe more subtle water-related concern mentioned. Silt flushing.
Oh, yes, the silt.
India could now flush silt from its reservoirs without warning Pakistan. Why is that a big deal?
Well, these Himalayan rivers carry enormous amounts of silt, like sand and mud.
Okay.
This silt builds up behind dams and barrages over time. It reduces storage capacity, can damage turbines. So periodically, they need to flush it out.
Right.
But if India suddenly releases huge amounts of this silt-heavy water without giving Pakistan any warning,
It causes damage downstream.
potentially significant damage, yes. It could clog up Pakistan's irrigation canals, damage their power plant intakes, affect water quality, and without any notice, Pakistan wouldn't have time to shut intakes or take other protective steps.
Wow. It really shows how interconnected everything is, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And the report zooms out a bit, too, reminding us about the wider geopolitical context. India itself is downstream from China on another major river system, the Brahmaputra.
Crucial point.
And the Indus itself actually starts in Tibet, in China.
Yes, this regional picture is so important. Water politics here are rarely just about two countries. You might remember back in 2016, after India made that strong statement, blood and water cannot flow together, following another attack, China actually blocked a tributary of the Brahmaputra River.
Oh, right. I remember that.
Now, China said it was just for ongoing dam construction, but the timing was widely seen as, well, a signal of support for their ally, Pakistan.
Interesting timing, yeah. And China's building a lot more water infrastructure up there in Tibet, isn't it? Including plans for the world's biggest dam on the Brahmaputra.
They are. Massive projects. And that's definitely a source of ongoing concern for India, completely separate from the Indus situation.
So India worries about China controlling the Brahmaputra's flow?
Well, yes. Even though China insists its dams will have minimal impact downstream, India has long worried about the potential implications for its own water security in its northeastern states if China gains too much control over that river's flow. It just shows this complex web of water, power, and politics across the whole region.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. As we wrap up this deep dive on the Indus Waters Treaty potential suspension, what are the main takeaways for you?
I think first, the potential suspension is clearly a major geopolitical signal driven by these really high tensions.
Right.
But second, India's actual ability to just stop the water immediately seems limited by their current infrastructure. It's not like flipping a switch.
Okay, so the immediate impact might be different.
Possibly. The more immediate, tangible worries seem to be around the dry season impact if water management changes without consultation.
Makes sense.
The end of that vital data sharing, which hits flood planning,
Yeah.
and this risk of unannounced silt flushing damaging Pakistan's infrastructure downstream, those seem like the more near-term concerns.
It's really quite a stark situation, isn't it? A treaty that was so robust it survived wars.
Yeah.
Now it's under this kind of pressure.
It really is. It highlights that incredibly delicate balance between cooperation and conflict, especially when you're talking about shared essential resources like water.
Yeah.
And it does raise bigger questions, doesn't it, about how resilient these international agreements really are when politics and security fears just take over.
Definitely. So thinking about all this complex mix of water, politics, security in such a critical region, how might this potential suspension, even if it doesn't happen tomorrow or is temporary, how might it reshape the dynamics, not just between India and Pakistan, but maybe bringing China more into the equation? And what other consequences, maybe ones we haven't even thought of yet, could ripple out from shaking up such a long-standing, vital agreement? That's definitely something for you to keep mulling over.